In this updated Family Guy tree, I'm gonna go through every single one of Peter Griffin's ancestors.
Holy crap, I'm black!
Including all of the ones I missed last time.
That's right. We trace our early family roots to Asia.
I'll also be exposing his 3 secret families.
Who's hungry?
Yeah, Mommy's home!
Hello, dear.
As well as breaking down how many kids he's actually got. And it's a messy one, so let's get into it. So let's start all the way back to the Stone Age to meet Caveman Peter. And the funny thing about this Neanderthal is that he's actually smarter than modern day Peter. Which granted, isn't that hard to beat.
What color is a fire truck?
Oh God, I always get these.
Caveman Peter was so smart that he was responsible for the greatest invention ever, the wheel. And he used his hot cave woman wife to promote it, effectively becoming the pioneer of product marketing.
Damn all, what deuce? Victory stews.
If we follow the tree down, we come to Moses Griffin, a prophet of God who led the Jewish people out of Egypt and even parted the Red Sea. God even entrusted Moses with the stone tablets containing the 10 Commandments.
Commandment number 1, shut the hell up.
Continuing on, we come to King Arthur Griffin. Although the great tales of Arthur pulling the sword from the stone seem to be greatly exaggerated, because even with the promise of bedding a princess, he seemed too lazy to pull out Excalibur completely.
What if I could just move it an inch? Will you touch me?
Nobility seems to run through Peter's veins as we come to the 14th century ancestor, the King of Denmark. His demise came when he suffered a heart attack at an enormous table, which meant that the doctor could not go round to treat him in time. And that, kids, is why Denmark builds such little tables. Now, let's fast forward to the 16th century to meet Leonardo Da Vinci. Now, a lot of you last time on the video commented that I forgot to include this genius in Peter's family tree, but you may notice that unlike his other ancestors that look exactly like Peter, this one looks like Stewie. Which is because Stewie is related to Da Vinci through his mother's line, and not his father's.
He looks just like you. Da Vinci must be my ancestor.
Although if we are going to get really technical, Peter and Lois are distantly related through Nate Griffin and Lois Laura Bush Lynn Cheney Pewterschmidt. So I guess Da Vinci is also Peter's great ancestor too. Look, I'm just trying to do my job here and make it all work, alright? We now come to Peter's distant relative Ponce de Leon Griffin, an explorer who discovered the Fountain of Youth, but when he took a dip in the pool, it resulted in a baby body but a giant adult head.
Well, that was worth the 8-year boat ride.
Now, I don't know exactly where to put the next Griffin, but in the season 11 episode No Country Club for Old Men, Peter mentions that he has an old painting of an ancestor in his attic that can talk. Before we then cut to a statue of another ancestor. Next up is Griffin Peterson, who Peter learns about through a fortune teller, which makes it unclear whether or not this is an ancestor or it's just one of his reincarnations. But whoever he may be, let's talk about him. Griffin lived in England in the 1700s and was deeply in love with Lady Redbush. But when King Stuart took a fancy to her, he banished Griffin to the New World. And upon setting foot in America, Griffin soon established the settlement of Quahog. Many years later, he was reunited with his lost love and quickly got rid of his current wife. But the king tracked down the happy couple to bring his wife back home. So to settle this dispute, they had a talent show where Stuart cracked some observational jokes while Griffin won the crowd over with his rockin' band. So Griffin naturally won and went on to marry Lady Redbush, and together they helped nurture Quahog into the city it is today. Now let's jump to 1776 with another ancestor that Stewie once mentioned, who was hung next to American patriot Nathan Hale, who was famous for his last words, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." But the Griffins' ancestors were far less eloquent.
If you kill me, I'm going to immediately void. All over here. All over here.
We've now come to Peter's either 5th or 6th great-grandfather. His name was Nate Backman, which is a reference to Stephen King's old pen name, and someone they've referenced a fair few times in the show.
Thank you, Stephen King. We'll see you in court.
Anyway, Nate was living a happy life in Africa along with Quagmire and Joe's ancestors until he was captured and transported into America.
Wow, you're a different color than me. Would you like to be equals?
When he arrived, he was given the name Nate Griffin and was forced into slavery under Silas Pewterschmidt, Carter's ancestor. Now, Nate instantly took a liking to Silas's daughter and sneakily got her attention.
Is someone there?
Nate won her over with his humour and they quickly fell in love and raised a secret family for over 15 years. But when her father found out, Nate gave him what for and the family fled to the north. Now finally free, Nate got back at the white man by creating the Department of Motor Vehicles. So technically, Peter and Lois are distantly related, as Lois is a descendant of Silas Pewterschmidt through another child. And through one of Nate's sons, we have Thomas Griffin, the philosopher.
Please go look for a job.
Why?
Now, golf is one of the most popular sports in the world, and we have Peter's great-great-great-uncle to thank for it. But he wasn't all good, as Angus Griffin actually invented golf after agreeing with a bunch of other Scotsmen that they wouldn't allow Jewish or black people to play the game. In addition to the Scotsman, Peter's other great-great-great-great-uncle was Jabba the Griffin.
Go la walk a nipple pinchy.
Peter Griffin has mentioned two great-great-grandfathers, with one being John Wilkes Photo Booth Griffin. He got his name by shooting Abraham Lincoln because he did the whole bunny ears over John's head during a photo session. And then there was Esaias, who was Peter's other great-great-grandfather, whose claim to fame was owning one of the world's first telephones.
Hello, Jonathan?
No, what number are you calling?
7.
Well, this is 3.
Oh, sorry.
His brother Ulysses S. Griffin was much more impressive, beating Robert E. Lee in a beer-drinking contest which ended the Civil War.
All right, no more slaves. But we still don't have to read books. Deal.
Yeah! Woo!
Now yes, again, this makes no sense history-wise or continuity-wise, but then again, Family Guy does have its own alternative history. Now, things must have been very tense in Ulysses Griffin's household, as his conjoined twin brothers were on opposing sides of the Civil War. And when his Confederacy brother announced that he was seceding, his conjoined twin shot him.
Not too smart, huh?
Yeah, did not think that one through.
Which wasn't really the best plan, but even still could hint at the growing stupid DNA in the Griffin gene pool. Speaking of uncles, let's move down to his Austrian great-uncle Peter Hitler, who was a super annoying brother.
Yeah, Germinator! I'll be back. Whoa!
Now, through either John or Esaias, Peter somehow had at least 4 great-grandfathers. One great-grandfather was Willie Black-Eye Griffin, who was the greatest silent actor of the 1920s. His Oculus misadventures made him a real superstar, so his family were the wealthiest people in Hollywood. But his golden years ended when Willie's voice was found out to be not quite right for talking pictures.
Get in there and finish your homework!
Then there was great-grandfather Juarez. And although small in stature, he had a ferocious fighting spirit, being a professional cockfighter. So it looks like fighting chickens has been a Griffin family tradition for many years now. Then there was also Hog Griffin, who rafted down the mighty Mississippi River, and the fourth and hopefully final great-grandfather was Take on All Comers Griffin, who made a living boxing kangaroos, which I was surprised to learn was a real thing back in the day. Anyway, let's continue down to Peter's grandfather Hesiah, who worked at Warner Brothers and helped design Bugs Bunny, although he had a very different and controversial name in mind for Bugs that I'm definitely not allowed to say on YouTube.
Oh, you can all go to hell!
Now, I thought that this was a good point to mention Peter's Asian grandparents that are seen in season 16. However, this was a non-canon episode that saw the Griffins in different time periods, so technically, I don't really think this counts. Peter has 3 great aunts that he talks highly of. One is Queen of Burlesque Griffin,
Cheesy jokes and ugly broads.
the other is Legs Go All the Way Up Griffin,
Do those legs go all the way up?
Why, yes, they do.
Ah!
and his most famous aunt, Ella Fitzgerald Griffin, who hit a note so high that she smashed a glass and blinded Ray Charles. Peter also has a fair few cousins, one being Rufus, who was an actor who starred in blaxploitation films, such as Caddy Black and Black to the Future. Another famous actor cousin includes Kathy Griffin. And of course, his other cousin Peter the Pig.
I just made stool in there, and if you blow it down, the whole woods is gonna stink. Do you understand?
And yeah, I know what you're thinking, but if you can have a great uncle who is Jabba the Hutt, then it shouldn't come as a shock that he has a talking pig as a cousin. And in a super dark cutaway in one episode, we learn that Peter has a cousin called JC Duggart Griffin. Peter's mother was called Thelma, and as a young woman, she had a fling with an Irish drunk called Mickey McFinnigan. And upon returning to the stage, she discovered that she was pregnant, which she tried to terminate. But she was a little too late, and out popped our man Peter. She later wed a guy called Francis, who was a strict Catholic man, who adopted Peter, and for most of his life, Peter thought that Francis was his biological father. And because of this, you could say that none of his Griffin ancestors are technically blood related, but I don't think that's the case. I mean, they are all literally Peter clones. I mean, I don't actually remember that Francis' surname is ever mentioned, especially being as Griffin, making all of his Griffin ancestors related to him but through his mother's side. Or maybe it's just Family Guy and just a cartoon and I'm overthinking it. Anyway, Peter eventually found out about his dad as an adult, so embarked on a trip to Ireland to finally meet his birth father. But instead of the warm meeting he was hoping for, Mickey had absolutely no interest in getting to know Peter. In fact, he didn't even think he was his son.
You and me are nothing alike. Just ask me sheep, O'Brien. Whose leg do you have to hump to get a pint of Guinness around here?
So to prove his lineage, Peter challenged him to a drinking contest, and drinking every day at the Drunken Clam had toughened up Peter's liver so much that he drank Mickey right under the table. Once crowned the winner, Mickey proudly proclaimed that Peter was his true son, and they celebrated with a jig and a song. Peter's uncle, named Guy in the White Hat Griffin, is a reference to a famous photo of Jim Lavelle, a detective who was present at the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald. Either through his mother or his father, Peter has a fair few siblings. He has a strange hairless twin who he keeps locked up in his storm shed, who he feeds eggshells and coffee grounds at Christmas. But one day, hairless Peter escapes and shoots hairy Peter, stealing his clothes so he can take his place. Peter also has an evil brother called Thaddeus who sports a spiffing mustache and a top hat. But we don't really know too much about him. He also has a broster, introduced in a flashback and never seen since.
Hey Peter, you want to see my paginas?
And in one episode, we're introduced to another twin brother called Chip. It turns out that Chip had been growing underneath Peter's skin on his shoulder, so when Dr. Hartman cut the growth open, out popped Chip.
Wow, your wife is gorgeous.
Is that a foot?
Almost.
And at first, Peter was super happy to have a brother, and the two quickly became the best of buds. But Peter eventually grew tired of his brother's overly positive outlook on life and resented how much his family loved Chip. So much, in fact, that he got Chip removed. But he soon changed his mind when he fell down the stairs and his brother rescued him, so Peter finally welcomed him into the family.
As far as I'm concerned, you're a permanent part of our family now.
But Chip didn't want to stick around as he wanted to explore the world, so they tied him to a balloon and sent him off up and away. But Chip would land on his little legs and would find a job as an actor in the TV show The Middle. In addition to these, he also technically has a clone. When Peter hung his hand out of the car window, it got sliced off and the hand grew another Peter. But this time, he wore a green shirt and he called himself Red Tip. Now let's not forget about his sister Karen. Karen was constantly picking on Peter growing up, and because of this, Peter subconsciously saw Karen in his daughter Meg, so this is why he bullied her. Even as an adult, Karen made his life hell. So fed up with being picked on, Peter and Karen went toe-to-toe in the wrestling ring, and just as he was about to be choked out, he was saved by Meg. Despite always being picked on and being made the butt of his jokes, Meg said that she will always stand by her dad.
I'm really sorry I treated you so badly over the years. I guess I was taking out all the pain I felt on you.
But as it turns out, that chair shot put Karen into a coma. So yeah, that's why we haven't really seen her since.
Doctor says there's nothing they can do.
And finally, we come to the man himself. Peter is of course married to Lois, and together they have 3 children, Meg, Chris and Stewie. But in addition to them, he has tons more offspring. There's Bertram, who was born via surrogacy when Peter donated his little Griffins. And of course, Bertram would go on to be one of Stewie's sworn enemies and be shot in the head by him with an arrow. And on a really dark note, there was also Junior, who Peter shook a little too hard.
I thought if I shook him enough, he'd stop crying. I was kinda right.
As well as Chris's deceased twin.
You know, Chris, you and your stillborn twin Tmiss were named after Christmas.
Stewie also had a twin that didn't make it.
Oh no, did Dave not make it?
But that's not all, because Stewie had another twin who died of a heart attack. Not to mention Peter's oldest child, who was abandoned when he got stuck in a cinema chair. And guess what? It's not over, because it was revealed in season 11 that Meg had a conjoined twin inside of her body.
Is it worth anything?
It is to me. I've been using it as a bookmark.
And in another episode, we learned that Meg Griffin unalived her sibling when they were young.
But I remember it so.
It was a dream!
And in 2 separate episodes, it was shown that Peter has 3 secret families. For one of them, he dresses up as a woman and has 3 kids with a man, although they probably aren't his biological children. And in another, he's married to a woman and they have a daughter together, which certainly is his biological daughter. And finally, he's married to a man he later kills. And that's hardly the end of it, because it was revealed in another episode, A House of Full Peters, that he donated more of his little Peters at the sperm bank. And one day, many years later, they all turned up on his doorstep.
We're all your children. We came from your semen.
And by the end of this episode, Peter learned a very valuable lesson: to keep the semen where it belongs, in the bathroom sink. This is before we pan down to find that his DNA has gotten into several sewer gators and rats, producing animal griffin hybrids. Meaning that Peter's genetic line will continue for many more years and species. God help us all. And that comes to the end of the video. Which of Peter's ancestors do you like best, and do you have any interesting ancestors? Do let me know in the comments below. I love chatting to you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.